The pre-Labor Day start time. So Marty's going to present to us 3 options that we'll have to consider today. So I think after he presents, we'll start the discussion for which of the options we want to consider and go from there.
Okay, thank you, Jeanette. So this discussion rose out of Thursday's forum discussion around pre-Labor Day start and wondering how we would move forward in the division around considering a pre-Labor Day start for this coming school year, or whether we should look at this in future years. So if we go to the next slide, looking at our options, we essentially have 3 options to look at today. Option 1 would simply be to do nothing. The school board has already approved a calendar for the 16-17 school year, and so we could simply do nothing, allow that calendar to move forward and not have any further discussions about a pre-Labor Day start. The second option would be to consider a pre-Labor Day start for the 16-17 school year, which is this coming school year. And then the third option would be to consider that start for the 17-18 school year. So for option 1, as you can see on our slide, we can do nothing. It simply is that, and as I said earlier, we have a calendar that you all have already adopted and is ready to go for the next school year. I know that we've had several conversations though around what a pre-Labor Day start would look like, so the board is probably loath to just do nothing in terms of the calendar. So in terms of option 2, as we spell out option 2 in terms of what that start would look like for next year, we have some documents that were actually requested at the forum, and so we'll use this option 2 to outline and highlight how the board and the system can move forward, and then it will be much of that same information as we go into option 3. So first of all, we have the waiver calculation itself, and I believe it was Mr. Moon who asked for the code citation, and so as part of the documents, the supporting documentation, we've actually given you a copy of the actual code, which is 22.1-79.1, stating that being foreclosed an average of 8 days per year during any 5 of the last 10 years because of severe weather conditions, energy shortages, power failures, or other emergency situations, then we can apply for a waiver. Now, on Friday afternoon, as I was on my way home, I had a very good conversation with Mr. Moon as I was driving home around the waiver. And as we were having our conversation, this waiver that we're applying for, we're not, in a sense, applying for anything. What we are doing is that because we qualify, we will be advising the state board of our intent to begin early. So I want to clear that up now, is that there isn't a process by which we ask for a waiver. We simply, as part of a compliance process, as part of a report with the compliance process, we then explain to the state that we as a system have an intent to begin the school system early. So that's an important consideration to understand as we move through this. If you've printed out your documents prior to today, I just want to note that we have made a brief change to this page here. We had highlighted one of the cells incorrectly, so we now have the cells correctly identified. But you'll see that when we look at the formula, looking at the last 10 years and having our 5 highest years, we look at 2009-10, 2010-11, 2013-14, we have 14-15, and then 15-16, which give us an average of 8.4 days that we have missed when you use the state's formula. Because of that, we are now eligible to inform the state of our intent to start the school year early. We had some questions about how long we will be eligible for this state waiver. And if you look at the chart behind me, we'll be eligible to apply for the waiver, or at least inform the state, until the school year 2019-2020. There is a change to your document as well. Previously that said 18-19, but it is the 19-20 school year.
But keep in mind, it could go well beyond that, because once we fill in those bottom 3 question marks, you see how the mathematical formula, we just recalculate it. So it could be, the answer to this question is, if we get no snow days, 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19, 0 snow days.
We will still
That
be
could happen
good.
maybe, huh? We would still qualify for this waiver into the school year 1920.
And as that 10-year window shifts, the unfortunate thing is any time beyond the 1920 school year, 2009-10 comes off. So that year with 10 days comes off of the list. So we would have to have a year with at least 8 days for us to move at least beyond one more year.
And keep in mind, we have 7 this year, and we have some more snow coming Tuesday.
Oh, Dr. Garja.
So there was a question about, when we push that button, what does that mean when we push the button? So there's a pre-Labor Day status report that's a part of our standards of quality compliance reporting that we do annually. So with that report, we provide a lot of information to the state in an online fashion. And part of that is for us to then inform the state of our intent to begin the school year early. If we chose, in terms of option 2, to move forward with a 16-17 pre-Labor Day start, we would then inform the state board of our intent by July 31st, well, by August 1, of our intent to begin early. If we choose not to have an early start, we simply wouldn't fill that portion of the state compliance, fill out that portion of the state compliance report. And again, that's due every year by August 1st. So for every year that we would like to start school before Labor Day, we merely have to inform the state board during our regular reporting cycle, and that always occurs before August 1st. You've noted here that we have a copy of the 16-17 calendar that we considered in December, and we have made just a few changes to this calendar that correspond or coincide with the changes that we made to the regular calendar by moving the 2E from the December 16th, the early dismissal, to the May 26th for Memorial Day. So that was a change that we made so that this calendar would look more like the calendar that the board approved in December. But this is that 2016-17 pre-Labor Day calendar. Just a few pieces to refresh those, and for those who weren't on the board when we were taking a look at this, you'll see that we've moved the beginning of the school year up by 1 week. Our teachers would be returning in August 15th for our new teachers, August 19th for our veteran teachers, with the school year starting on August 29th for students. If you go down to the lower right-hand corner, you can see the breakdown of our quarters, with the first quarter ending on the 4th of November. We have 47 days for the first quarter, 43 days for the second quarter, and we would then have 47 and 43 for quarters 3 and 4. I'm going to kind of shoot it over to Dr. Lockhart to talk about some of the pros and cons of a pre-Labor Day start. We got some feedback from our principals at all levels to talk about the pros and cons of that pre-Labor Day start. Dr. Lockhart?
Thanks, Marty. Just some considerations as we, I'm sorry. There we go. Just some considerations for us to think about as we have the conversation about before or after Labor Day starting. There are other things to consider, but we highlighted a few of the main considerations. Obviously, a little more instructional time before we head into that winter break, and then that also parlays right after the break. And this year is kind of a perfect example where we have a little more flexibility built in if we do need to make some adjustments to the semesters. We're not so bound to the 7th semester reporting timeline. More time to prepare for end-of-year exams, SOLs, AP, IB, et cetera. We also, now that SOL retakes are a part of our elementary, middle school programs, we have more time to do that. We were pushing it pretty hard last year, and obviously the school year ends earlier. These considerations are really particularly for this coming year, or the first year of this being in play, So for the Cons shortened summer break, that would be kind of a 1 year only sort of con, because you have to start, we have to end and start early if that's the choice. That shortens the summer a little bit for that first time. Hope that makes sense. Summer employment conflicts for teachers, impacts on family vacations. Again, probably a 1 year kind of impact to consider there, as folks, if the decision is made to change the start time, folks would, enough advance notice would begin to work around that. Like I said, there are some other pros and cons. I've heard different things from folks. A lot of our students, particularly our student athletes, come back very early in August. We have a lot of students back for extracurriculars and such. Those are some of the pros. I've heard other cons as well, as summer jobs, summer work, those types of things. So just a few things for consideration as we head into the conversation.
I'd like to add to this if I could. And at one point, when we were talking about this in the fall, you all collected a list of school systems that started before Labor Day in Virginia, if I recall correctly. Can you all pull that again for us? I know this has been a quick turnaround. I think we talked about this Thursday night, and we're talking about it today. But if I recall correctly, we're one of the few school systems that do not have that current flexibility to start before Labor Day. So if you could get that at some point for us.
Yeah, we can get that.
Okay. A couple of things I'd like to add to this. You'll note in the pre-Labor Day calendar, we're able to balance the semesters much better. And so the challenge that we experienced just recently with the snow days, it gives us, I think, other folks have commented on this. It gives us a lot more flexibility if we have to move quarters around due to snow and that kind of thing. It gives us a lot more flexibility. With regard to the AP IB testing piece, our students are at a disadvantage because everyone takes the test at the same time, even if their school starts much earlier than us. So our students are pressed, and I feel like our teachers feel that pressure to try to catch our kids up because our students are starting 1 to 2 weeks later than other school systems. And that's a big difference. I know Ben's shaking his head down there. That's a big difference for our IB and AP students. So I want to comment that's an important piece. And then I also want to comment, we were just at a business roundtable this week, right? Was that last week? And I had a gentleman mention that his son has missed out on numerous summer opportunities in June because we go so late into June that his son had not been able to participate in a number of different learning opportunities that were in some cases in other states that he couldn't participate in. So while we lose a little during the summer, that it's really only the first year we implement it. After that, that time is back. You get that time back, but it's just earlier in the summer. It's the first year that's probably going to be the hardest whenever we pick to do this. What if we do this? Would that be 16, 17, or 17, 18? I think we have to acknowledge that the first year is the hardest because we're coming off a late year and starting much earlier. But then after that, I think it starts to balance itself out.
On to option 3, so we've looked at that in context with 16, 17. Everything's pretty much the same for option 3. It's just that we would consider that start for the 17, 18 school year. And based on conversations at the forum, we possibly could schedule future school board work sessions around the topic, engage the community so that we had more information from the community around the desire to have an early start. And then at that point, once the board felt confident that you had enough information from staff and community, that you could direct the superintendent to create a pre-Labor Day calendar as part of the regular calendar development process. And that process generally begins in August. We sit down in August and start talking about the calendar. for approval then in December. So that gives you an idea of when some of these conversations would have to be held in order for us to know whether or not we would, in August, start working on a pre-Labor Day calendar for the 17-18 school year.
I just want to emphasize on that point. When we develop a calendar, we spend a number of months, probably a good 3 months or so, developing the calendar. In fact, the calendar that we end up bringing to you for adoption is usually very different than the calendar we kind of started off with.
Very different.
As a draft, because it changes based upon feedback that we receive. In fact, I probably come up with a couple of examples of this year's calendar that was different than it has been in the past, because our teachers, our parents, a lot of people have input into how the calendar is designed. So if you go with the 17-18 as the starting point, should you wish to do that, we could build that into the normal process where people have a lot of input into when we start, and just the overall construction of the calendar. So just to reiterate, 3 options that we could see based upon Thursday night's discussion. 1 is doing nothing. 2 is to adopt, go ahead and start before Labor Day in this coming school year, 16-17. If in fact that's the case, I think you all had iterated or discussed on Thursday night that should we wish to do that, or should you wish to do that, we need to move as quickly as possible because people's schedules be affected. And or if you prefer, you do want us to do it, but you want to wait till 17-18. So I think those are the three options that we could see at this point.
And as Dr. Garza pointed out, we had 8 different versions of the calendar between August and December. So.
Okay, so we'll go forward with discussing these 3 options, and then after everyone's had a chance to speak, we'll get a sense of what we want to do next. So I have Ms. Schultz, followed by Mr. Press, and then Ms. Strauss.
So one of the things that I think is interesting in talking to board members that I'm fascinated with is how many people in the community are advocating for the 16-17. I thought that it would be a slam dunk that everybody would say, nope, too early, to this, to that. What I do see as a positive in that is a propensity and a open-mindedness of our community to welcome it. The flip side is those that are committed, that have annual plans, that have been long-standing plans, things like family vacations, family reunions, kids headed off to trips and mission trips, that's the word I was looking for, that are not recoverable. One of the biggest gaps that I have in terms of a knowledge gap of imparting knowledge onto the community about why this is important, and I find that I think the knowledge gap is the biggest with families who have younger children. That is not quite as well understood if maybe their children are middle school or younger. Are things like standardized tests that are nationally established, and school systems around the country are starting as much as a month earlier than we are. These are people who get out in May in the South and go back at the beginning of August, not even like sometime in August, they go back in the beginning of August. Well, those kids, have a huge leg up on our kids. Things like summer employment opportunities diminish greatly for kids who are not available until getting out weeks, if not a month later. And then other things like academic camps, theatrical camps, football camps. A lot of them, my own children have missed things like a quarterback camp because it was the first week in June. I'm like, well, how is it I'm like, who's attending the first week in June? So there are things like that. And for things like Park Takes, that establishes all of these, or the high schools that put on camps over the summer, everything will adjust regardless. So if people are traditionally attending something the 3rd week of August, if we announce with enough time the people who are the camp owners, the parks and rec people, everybody else will plan accordingly. Now, the one question that that did come up an awful lot was, well, if they're going to get out earlier, why only 1 week? Like, why not? Like, so what would an alternative be? And so that's where a little bit, as much as I think maybe pleasantly surprised that there's a throng of interest in this, is that could it look a lot different? Not just a tiny bit different, but a lot different. And I don't want to muddy the water, but I am gonna put the bait out there. I think this should be part of a bigger discussion around a completely different calendar, a calendar that's driven towards student achievement, a calendar that puts students at the front instead of antiquated agricultural season breaks for growing periods that no longer really comport with what kids need, and other offerings. It's a bigger fish to fry later, but year-round schooling, trimesters, intercessions, other things that are around student achievement, and create the best opportunity for kids at all ends of the spectrum, for highly involved, high achieving students to take even more things, maybe, but fewer on their plate at a time, so that they can have more depth and to not lose ground. So I'm interested to hear what all of you said. I've been interested in having this conversation for a long time, so I'm glad we're finally here. But I do think that the 16-17 coming out at the end of this discussion has to be a definitive line in the sand to give everybody some extra oxygen and breathing room.
To Mrs. Schultz's point, it is true that if we, with the waiver, that we do not have to start just 1 week earlier. We could start 2 weeks earlier or a week and a half earlier. That's why I think it'd be beneficial for you all to see yet again surrounding and area school systems, Virginia school systems, and when they start, because there are some that start. I think there was one that started just around us at August the 14th or something this past year.
Oh, I believe that there's, if I recall, it's about 176 school districts in Virginia, and about 137 or 8 start before Labor Day. So we are in the vast minority. I mean, we're well below the halfway threshold of the number of districts in the Commonwealth that even start after Labor Day anymore.
Yes, and my point was that I think many of them start more than a week before. Some start right in the middle of August. So that would be at the discretion of the school board, obviously.
Okay, Mr. Press, followed by Ms. Strauss.
Thank you very much. Before I kind of show my hand and explain which option I may be for or against, I want to share with you all a few observations that I've heard, some comments that I've received, so that hopefully can inform the discussion a little bit more. The first of which is, as was mentioned previously, there are a fair number of our student athletes who are very concerned about the implications of moving the start date up. As was mentioned, they come back very early in the summer and they rely on that practice time to get ready for the upcoming season and the upcoming athletic year. So that was an observation I've heard. I wanted to make sure that was out there. As I'm sure board members have heard, disrupted family vacation time that last week in August can be a very popular time for students and their families to take vacations, in large part due to the fact that so many other school divisions are back in school. The prices that week are driven down. So that is a concern that was shared with me. And a third one, which is probably the most informative to me and informative in my overall opinion of this pre-Labor Day start, is the fact that students have already, in a lot of cases, scheduled their summer work and internship experiences for this summer already. And I have some reservations about moving up a start date that could potentially impact that, because I personally do not want to prevent people from having meaningful employment, especially if that's going to mean that money may be used for themselves throughout the course of the school year. So particularly among many of our FRM students who may be working during that period. So that was a concern I wanted to share. I will say, though, that in my opinion, those concerns can all be addressed in the longer term. I have concerns about them being addressed this coming school year, just because by the fact that as Mr. McElveen mentioned, we're going to have to go through the forum new business action item process, by which point we'll have voted on this in March, which I think is a bit late for many of our families to plan around. And you know, I understand that it's very difficult to have a big question mark looming at that last week of August. So my personal advocacy would be on option 3, that this board move forward in the future with a pre-Labor Day start in this 17-18 school year. I think it is a bit, in my opinion, too late for us to adopt a calendar that starts pre-Labor Day for next school year for many of the concerns that I just mentioned. But I do strongly support a pre-Labor Day start the following year for many of the reasons that were previously stated. But in addition, I think many of the factors that were discussed contribute to our discussion of mental health. Our student stress load is greatly reduced when you've got that extra week and your teacher is no longer feeling that they have to assign you reading to do over the summer so that you can feel caught up to the rest of the divisions that, you know, and this might be something for us to discuss more with the College Board about, where the College Board is designing AP exams around a Memorial Day, around their dismissal, end of the school year, which is very, very, very disadvantageous for our students. So that's one of the reasons, and as we all learned this past few weeks, having flexibility with the semester and quarter ends is going to be a huge thing going forward. I think this was really, in my opinion, a lesson for us that the snow could not have come at a worse time with the semester end coming up and whatnot. Having more flexibility with that, I think, is going to make everybody's job a bit easier. It's going to make life easier for students. It's certainly going to make life easier for our educators, and I think it's going to make life easier for our central office staff. So, those are just a few of the reasons that I personally support option 3. I think that's our best way to move forward. And I notice we've got some of our student leaders in the back who board members might want to kind of ping after our work session today to get their thoughts on. So thank you.
All right, Ms. Strauss, followed by Ms. McLaughlin, and then I have Ms. Evans.
Thank you. For starters, I would wholeheartedly support option 3. I am hearing from some high school families that they would like us to make the change this fall, but I'm hearing from a lot more families of younger children that they would prefer option 3. And these are people who've already put money down on vacations, all the things that Mr. Press has talked about. I absolutely think we need to take advantage of the waiver. I would not want to pass this up. We have so wanted to have a different calendar that starts before Labor Day. And I think we need, if we, decide on an option 3, I think we just decide on it and direct the superintendent staff to work on a pre-Labor Day calendar. I don't think it's necessary to go through a huge process. I think we just do it. Mr. Smith, do we only get to exercise this waiver once every 10 years? That's my other question. Since the state has changed, how many times in a row, if we get a lot of snow, we maybe pray for snow now. So how many years in a row can we use this waiver?
So as long as we're eligible. So for now, we have eligibility through the 19/20 school year.
So could we start before Labor Day every year up until that?
Yes.
Whoa.
Yes.
Isn't that wonderful? And we could prove to the tourism
and
industry.
it's very likely that it would continue beyond that.
It's very likely.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's wonderful. All right. I would vote for option 3 and look at all kinds of things. And I think we need to indicate to the community this eligibility that is more than 1 year. Because I know people have asked me that and I haven't understood it. And those who continually lobby against the pre-Labor Day start, particularly in the General Assembly, I think they are not aware that if we continue to have unusual winter weather, that we can be eligible for years in a row. So we could maybe prove that this really does help student achievement and to not pay attention to sales tax loss to the tourism industry.
See, I don't understand that argument either. It makes no sense to me.
No, we've been
Because
fighting it for years.
whatever, time is not available, if we take away from August time, get it back in June. So that argument in terms of an economic argument
Yes, I would
seems
agree.
not to make sense to me. But
I would
anyway,
agree, and they keep-
I don't know, am I missing something?
Yes, and they keep doing studies proving how much money they will lose. We keep saying, but student achievement, but I agree. Well, this is great. So if we could do multiple years and then just continue to get a lot of snow every year so that we will finally get around the King's Dominion law one way or another. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. McLaughlin, and then I have Ms. Evans, Ms. Corbett Sanders, and Ms. Hines.
So the beauty of 12 members on the board is you end up having diverse perspectives. And so I'm going to try and provide the other one. First of all, as a native Californian, I got to tell you, to this day, I strongly dislike East Coast summers. Can't stand them. They're the worst thing in the world. The humidity factor. No, seriously, the humidity factor here is horrible if you come from the wine country of California. So to Dr. Garza's question, I, as a parent, would far prefer to have my child in school in June, playing on the blacktop, where the weather in Virginia is not nearly as unbearable as it is in August. So, when you talk about people can go to the beach, anyone who's gone to the Outer Banks knows it is not nearly as warm, sunny. The water hasn't warmed up yet. I mean, there are trade-offs for, being able to finish earlier in June is great, but August is meant to not be, in Washington if you can help it. And that's why Congress goes into August recess. And, most of the East Coast pretty much goes into August recess. So it is all relative. I know I'm talking to a Texan who says, let me tell you, it's hot from April to October. So,
Yeah, in the summer it'll take your breath away in some places in Texas.
Yep. So, all kidding aside for some other serious things to consider. So, I'm hearing so much anxiety in our community and even in board member conversations about, getting a leg up on the AP and IB or get on the AP exams and SOLs. And, as a parent who has now had 2 boys take a combination of 16 AP exams, their experience was not that extra week meant I could have gotten, I don't know, if you get a 5 on the AP Calculus BC exam, there's no higher to go on it. I mean, so I don't know that we've done the analysis to say, how do we even know that our students' scores would change by an extra week? We don't necessarily know that. So I think we also have to be mindful for anyone whose families have engaged in the Northern Virginia Swim League, and that has over 100 swim teams. Over 17,000 students in Northern Virginia participate in that. So for this coming fall, 2016, which I hear a lot of people saying, thankfully, that would be too soon. And to give credit to Dr. Garza during our forum, she also had said, we really helped bring our community along with the later start times when we didn't all of a sudden hit them with, well, we're putting it in right now. So I think we really would hurt ourselves to, try to cram this in for this fall. I don't think we've had the community engagement level. I appreciate Ms. Schultz heard a lot on her Twitter feedback, but the emails I'm getting in Braddock from teachers and families is, no, it's very real that we have employment, that we have, summer vacations, and there's a real cost factor to it. And finally, for anyone who's had summer athletes, right now, I've lived this for the last 6 years, you get 1 week between the end of the summer swim league and when the high school sports tryouts begin. So if we were to jam this in now, NVSL can't adjust their schedule, and so we would end up finding ourselves with, kids starting to say, now there's zero time for even families to go out of town, because you don't go out of town during swim league, and you're not going to go out of town when your kid's now in the midst of tryouts for high school. So there's a whole host of reasons, but I will say, to Ms. Strauss's point, I I don't think we need to do an extensive later start time community engagement on this thing. But when and if this board decides that if we're going to go with option 3, I will very vocally say that if we don't hold a public hearing on this, shame on us. It takes one night. And, you know, I think that's at minimum, because that just at least puts the flag up for people to be paying attention. I can't tell you how much people really don't realize right now that we're even having this conversation. And I, as a board member, would not be comfortable even considering making that decision to become a pre-Labor Day start school system without allowing the community to weigh in.
May I add that these slides were put together at your request? I think probably they posted on Friday after quick. So I would be the first to say we didn't do any comprehensive analysis. This is just what we thought were, you said, put pros and cons. So we put down what we think we've heard from our community over these last couple of years. So we're not suggesting that AP IB scores will go down. We're just suggesting that, you know, so we're not suggesting, you know, anything like that. We're just saying something to think about. I did get 75 school systems in Virginia have a waiver, pre-Labor Day waiver, and 58 do not.
Okay, I have Ms. Evans and Ms. Corbett Sanders, followed by Ms. Hines, Ms. Derenak Kofax.
So I'm going to have yet a different perspective on this. Mr. Moon and Mrs. Strauss will remember, I think they're the only two board members who will remember when Stewart and Falls Church and Glasgow had a waiver just for those schools to start 2 weeks earlier and end 2 weeks earlier. My daughter at the time was in middle school, and I have to admit I wasn't that keen on it because it meant a shorter summer, and I was for, you know, from the time she was 6 to the time she graduated, a swim parent, and so I had some qualms about it. But I will say that that 2-week shift was removed. I believe it was possibly in 2009. It was shortly before I was on the board. They said for budget reasons, although I never understood why it would have any budget impact. So those are 3 communities that have experience with this. And there has been some advocacy on the part of the Stewart community to go back, you know, even if they were the only ones who had the waiver. There is concern there of having as much instructional time before those all-important tests at the end of the year. That was one of the reasons to do it, and I think that community felt it was significant. I've heard from the Falls Church High School community as well. We have the PTSA president here in the audience, supportive of doing it now. So I am reluctant to take off the table doing it this fall, and I say that for a couple of reasons. We can't be sure that we will have more than 4 years of this. And if we don't do it this fall, then we have only assurance for 3. We would have to have 8 snow days in 16, 17, or 18. And you look back at 10, 11, 12, we had 4, 1, and 3. So we can't say with any certainty that we would have more than 3 years if we delay. Even if we did it this fall, we can't say with any certainty that we would have more than 4. When Stewart and Falls Church in Glasgow switched, it was 2 weeks. And yeah, that the students really didn't like that because it shortened their summer by 2 weeks. And so that was a tough summer for those communities. I think if we decided to go this fall, that would give us a little bit of flexibility if we decided to go back 1 more week. If we don't do it this fall, then we don't even have the flexibility. I don't think we would then go to 2 weeks the next year, but perhaps I'm wrong about that. I do understand about people having made their plans. We did try to give everyone a heads up, and I realize that doesn't mean that not everyone in Fairfax County Public Schools is watching our school board meetings with rapt attention, so I can't say that everyone was aware that we put out an alternative calendar, but we did advertise it to the extent we could. Right, so we sent it out to parents. So,
Family newsletters, kit, press release.
So we did try to make parents alert to that. So I think to the extent we feel there's an advantage, and I do see the advantage, even as a former swim parent who had to, squeeze things in because swim for us ended in July, and that meant we only had 2 weeks between swim and the start of school. People adjusted to that reality. So I would hate to take this off the table, take 16 off the table. Although I hear several of my colleagues saying they would like to because people have already made their plans. I fear that if we do it in 17, a couple of things, there will still be people who will say they've made plans, maybe with less credibility than this year. At the same time, there are also people in the General Assembly that really don't want us to do this. Will they somehow keep us from doing it? I don't know. The other question I have is if the board decides that we want to do it, but we want to do it in 17, 18, is there a possibility for a particular school community to do it on its own? Like we had before, like we had at Stewart, Glasgow, and Falls Church. Well, we do have a we do have a model. We do have a model for it. We did it for I think it was 6 years, something like that.
Well, there are, if you look at the code citation C, individual schools may propose and local boards may approve pursuant to guidelines developed by the Board of Education, alternative school schedule plans providing for the operations of schools. So individual schools could, but it would be a board decision to move forward with that.
So the process would not be to ask for the waiver and then only allow certain schools to do it. It would be that second piece.
So it wouldn't be asking for a waiver for the school division. It would be looking at an alternative plan for those individual schools, as long as we're meeting the 990 hours of instructional time.
Okay. Well, I guess what I'm saying, bottom line is, and I have not polled my community, I've gotten some input. I would like to see us get public input on these options. And I fear if we simply preclude 16, 17, we won't. Because I think we do need that. My advocacy would be to put 16, 17 on the agenda with the idea that once we have public engagement, we will know if there's support for that, and if not, we can certainly amend that to say 17, 18. And that would be, I believe, more in keeping with our process for posting something, getting public engagement on it, and then deciding either to do it or to postpone. And we very well might find out that just too many people would find it disruptive. But I think that we do need, specific and concerted public engagement on this before we decide in either direction.
Okay, Ms. Corbett Sanders, followed by Ms. Hines, Ms. Darna Kofax, and Mr. Moon.
Thank you, and thank you for your quick turnaround. I know that we put a lot on your plate since last Thursday. I actually would like to break this up into a couple of different buckets. One is the policy bucket from a school policy, what is the benefit of starting before Labor Day? And from that standpoint, I think we've heard a lot about the positives associated with, really serving what our raison d'etre for the school system is, which is educating students. And do we provide a better environment by front-ending the amount of time that our children experience top notch teaching before they actually take test? And do we create an environment via our calendar which focuses on that learning time before test, and then a calendar that reflects the priority of our community to create opportunities for our students during the summer, and so opportunities especially for our middle and high school students to take advantage of some of the programs that are available both in the state of Virginia but also nationally. And so that would be my first question, is from a policy point of view, is this good, sound policy to start before Labor Day? And from my perspective, it is good, sound policy. The second bucket I would suggest is the implementation of it. How do you go about changing a calendar which has been around for, frankly, as long as I can remember, which is a bit over a half a century. And when you do that, that's really the public engagement of how do you solicit input, and is it something that you do by saying, okay, we agree that this is good, sound policy, but we are concerned about how we engage the public and whether or not there is sufficient timing, and that's our third bucket, to do this in 2016, 2017, or do you need to push it off further? And so into a 2017, 2018 timeframe. And I think that there are some serious questions about the timing for 2016, 2017. And the timing is from a number of different areas. One is people that have already booked their vacations, because I know from beach houses, when people rent beach houses, when they check out at the end of their week or 2 weeks, they sign a paper saying, and we'd like the same time next year. And there are a significant number of people who have already done that and locked in, and that includes not only families with students in schools, but also our educator community, our teachers. And so I would not want to disadvantage people who have done that. It also impacts a number of kids, and I did do some polling, obviously not enough public engagement given the timing of it, but we have a number of families that actually travel to their home countries the last week of August, and it's already tough to get them back for the day after Labor Day. And so if we move that schedule up even further, these families will miss not necessarily the 1 week that is traditional in their extended holidays, but will be 2 weeks. And so that would be something that I would like us to take into account. I would actually like to propose a slightly modified option 3. And that modified option 3 is that we look at 2017, 2018 with a full public engagement process for it, signaling that we believe from a policy perspective that it is a good, sound policy to have our kids in school longer before they take these tests, but that we have that public engagement. We actually release a draft calendar prior to people going off on their vacations this year. My reason being is, if we're talking about more than 1 week, which I hadn't really thought about before this, then we should be signaling that to people before they go and rent beach houses for that 1 week earlier. And I would also suggest that we have, as part of our policy guidance to our principals and athletic directors, that by moving back 1 week, we really don't want to necessarily see all of our schedule now have kids coming back in July, because then you really are creating a shortened time frame for summer vacation. Thank you.
Okay, and I think that depending on what the sense is, that we'll then discuss how, if we choose option 3, we would go about doing that, I imagine. So, all right, Ms. Hines, followed by Mr. Netcook.
Thank you. All right, so on option one, do nothing, I don't support that. I think for a lot of the reasons that we've talked about already, all or most of our surrounding districts already do the pre-Labor Day start. And the exercise of building the pre-Labor Day calendar last year just, to me, illustrated how much better that calendar is for our schools than the way we're doing it now. So there are good reasons to do it. I agree with the notion that we need more public engagement on this. I mean, I've gotten some feedback, but it's a very few people who happen to be paying attention. And so far, in my experience, it's split. I've got, both opinions. So I would say on starting next fall, 16, 17, I would prefer to start next fall, but I would not do it without a lot more community engagement, especially since that is the one that feels so short to people. So if we were going to do that, I would say it would have to be the full experience, right? Like new business on February 18th and then action on March 10th. So to me, we couldn't really do that without that much engagement in the community. So to me, that's part of the decision making that we have to do. But if we decided not to do that, I definitely would support 17, 18 as a fallback. So I don't know, I had a thought. Maybe if we put, just to throw out there, if we put the 16, 17 calendar on the agenda for the next two meetings and then have a follow-on motion to direct the superintendent for 17, 18 or something like that, if there's support for that. But otherwise, if we're just going to agree today on 17, 18, I do think we need community engagement on it. And so whether it's a resolution that we do to direct the superintendent to do that, I would like to see that at one of our regular board meetings so that people have a chance to come testify about it.
Okay, and I'll support that as well. I definitely think if we decide to talk about 17, 18, that we even talked about it in the Public Engagement Committee meeting this morning about maybe we would refer it there so we could make sure that we do it as very well and then give families enough heads up before they hit this summer, whether it means not necessarily having the calendar, but at least knowing that we're looking at pre-Labor Day or not. Okay, Ms. Darren at Kofax, followed by Mr. Moon and Ms. Pelchak.
Thank you. At this time, my advocacy would be for option 3. From my community, I have heard from a small contingent, but mostly very vocal, against a start for this year, saving time in this discussion for all of the reasons some of my colleagues have mentioned. I do support more community engagement. I support applying for the waiver to begin in 2017-18. I'm also supporting to have the PEC committee look at a plan to make sure that the community engagement is done with fidelity, and I think Ms. Schultz, and also I think for some of the things, and I think we're seeing how hard this is. It's really 1 week, and it shouldn't be as complicated, but it's getting real gooey here. And at this point, I would certainly not be just throwing in these things out. I would not be supportive of starting 2 weeks early, starting in the middle of August. Ms. McLaughlin, you were joking, but I'm on board with you there. Starting in the middle of August, that would be abysmal here. And I think some of the things when we talk about camps, swim team performances, those kind of things, just like the traffic change with us with the later start time, those things would obviously adjust. Swim teams, if you're being, if your team is comprised of Fairfax County public students, if you're doing, I'm thinking of my daughter, her out of school performances, the people of swim teams, the camps, because, we've also, I'm arguing for one way, but I've also heard what some of you said. We've lost opportunities for camps outside the area that start in June. So I am for it. I think if we have 3 years of this, and then that gives us 3 more years to lobby our state delegation and talk about how this is extremely if we're finding benefits, which I think we are. I think the data points are showing that. But at this point, I think what it would do is if we put it on the calendar too soon, it would take something that could have very positive implications and make it negative, and I would be remiss at doing that.
Okay, we have 2 more comments, Mr. Moon, followed by Ms. Pelchak.
Thank you. I basically agree with what Mrs. Karen Cole Sanders said about option 3. didn't occur to me that we could even consider advancing the calendar by more than 1 week. I sort of remember that for my first boy, when he was in high school, he missed in the beginning of summer 1 whole week of a summer camp. But we're not going to just focus on doing this for people who are going to summer camp, who are swimming team, or those who are even playing sports in the fall season. But for me, it's for the larger group of students which affect basically, tests like SOL is going to affect vast majority of our students. For the high school students, AP tests are very important, AP and IB. So I'm gonna focus on those, but due to those reasons, I would be able to support starting prior to Labor Day. But for the upcoming school year, unfortunately, I'm at a point where I believe that if we go through this or due process, new business and an action item, we're not going to make a decision until for another month or so. I feel that that's kind of too late. And so rather than inviting a lot of community opposition or objection to is something we want to achieve with really good intent, that let's minimize such unnecessary confrontation from members of the public, that we start having pre-Labor Day start from next year, 2017 and 2018. Having said that, since there were still people who want to have as much advanced knowledge as possible as to what you want to do, I would like to see actually having some proposed calendar rather than waiting until August to start working on it, even before the end of this year, to show before people actually go on vacation, start making reservations for the following year. Let's have that and see. That's where I am, and I didn't think it was going to be this controversial, having taken up more than an hour of our work session time.
Ms. Palchik?
I will also be brief again, because I was about to say what Mr. Moon just mentioned. I know it may not be feasible, but leaning toward the 2017-18 calendar, I know our process generally starts in August, but if at all possible, to have some options that look at different start dates before the end of the school year, I think would really help our communities, our families, or teachers who have summer employments and vacations as well, to be able to better plan for next school year. I'm not leaning toward this year because of everything that was mentioned and needing appropriate community engagement, which would take about another month. But if we were to do that, I would like us to think about, one of the pushbacks I heard was from teachers about the August 19th teacher workday. So if we were going to look at 2016-17 to see if that could be switched to later in the school year, so there's not an additional extra Friday before school starts, possibly January 2nd. And I know it's opening a can of worms, but I would like us to think about, if we move to the earlier start date, to look at our holidays and to see if the way we observe our holidays is still the way we want to continue to observe them, or looking at a more multicultural county if we want to start to look at our holidays again. And finally, I would love us to definitely keep track of the impact of the change if we do that on our student achievement. Thank you.
Okay, we would go back for Ms. Schultz.
Just very quickly, I just thought I would take a look. Although I attended high school for my first 2 years in Fairfax County, Chantilly, go Chargers, I completed high school in California. And just for grins, I decided to go look at my high school's year-end calendar. They finish AP and IB testing Monday, the 29th and 30th of May. Guess when they get out? 3 days later, Friday, June 3rd. So that, for the families that are watching, especially if you have younger families, if you don't understand, they've got, in a couple of weeks leading up to that, but their testing ends on a Tuesday and the kids are out of school 3 days later. and the seniors may be out even earlier than that. And that's the 3rd of June. So there really is an adjustment that would occur, and I think that the engagement that we could do, but I think if you would, we should take at least a sense of the board for 16, 17.
All right, Mr. McElveen.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Huff. So I'm going to echo the advocacy that I provided last Thursday night. I believe we should go with option 3. And I know I speak for both Mr. Moon and myself in saying that because today is Lunar New Year, we both would prefer for today to be a holiday for the school board, but unfortunately we're stuck here. But as Ms. Huff mentioned before, I think the PEC would be happy to take on this assignment. So as we look at engagement, okay, thank you.
Okay, I have another go back from Ms. Evans.
Yes, thank you. So it sounds like we're solidifying around 17, 18, which is fine. I would go back to what Ms. Hines said and support the idea that we make a firm decision on this with public engagement as soon as possible so that we don't find ourselves in a bind next fall with people already having, then we're back in the same boat with vacation homes and all. So I do think that we do need to have the public engagement, make a definitive decision now, with February 18th, I guess, is the, new business action item on March, whatever that is, 10th. It doesn't have to be the final calendar, but just alerting everyone that we've asked the superintendent to create a pre-Labor Day calendar for 17, 18, so we can get that word out there, assuming that the public engagement supports that. I mean, we, between now and then we would. So I would support what Ms. Hines said on that regard.
Okay, so maybe the best way to go forward is to get a sense of the different options, starting with option 1, if anyone wants to do nothing about the calendar. Okay.
Well, can I ask a question, a clarification question? Isn't option 3 actually doing nothing?
I think we'll have next steps if we choose option 3. No waiver.
Okay, all right, I understand.
Ever.
Because then the question would be, do you have to do public engagement if you're not going to make a change? If the intention of the board is not to do anything for 16, 17, you don't need to enter into the parliamentary.
Well, I think the parliamentary piece would be for if we're going to make a decision about 17, 18, getting the public engagement and doing it before summer. Okay, so let's get a sense for option 2, if you would like to have more public engagement on considering 16, 17 pre-Labor Day. Okay, so that's 2, and then opposed to option 2. Okay, so we'll look forward now, option 3, and I guess we need to discuss next steps for going forward with 17, 18. Now, some things were thrown out about potential calendar versus just the conversation, deciding. I don't know if staff wants. Oh, okay. I'm new at this. All right, so option 3 being consider the pre-Labor Day waiver for 17, 18. All in favor with engagement. Okay, so that's unanimous.
Okay, with that said, just for clarity purposes, we have had a lot of people inquire about what we're going to do for 16, 17. So with what we've just heard, are you all comfortable with us letting our community know that our current calendar that already has been adopted for 16, 17 remains in effect? Okay.
Chairman Hines.
So for 17, 18, I'll just throw this out as an idea. If PEC wants to help with that, that's great. But I think I agree with people who said that we probably need to get the message to the community
pretty quickly and do it in a somewhat formal way so that we have the usual formal opportunities to participate. So in chairs this morning, we had talked about doing it as a resolution. So someone could bring a resolution as new business at our next meeting on the 18th and then action on March 10th, and that would give plenty of time. That's I put that out there.
Okay, and Ms. McLaughlin had mentioned a public hearing, so I don't know if that's something we would consider as part of the resolution or.
Well, the only thing I would say is if we have it as new business in action, that's 2 opportunities for public citizen engagement on it.
I really want to caution everybody, if we think a resolution where people can just sign up and say, are you okay with Fairfax County completely changing a calendar that's been in place for decades of starting after Labor Day, and that would be sufficient? I think that is completely fraught with problems, and I also think that this board has worked so hard to demonstrate to the public. I thought what I heard the conversation is that we want to entertain fall 2017. We would like to have a decision by this board made before this coming summer 2016. So whichever way we're going as a school system, families going into their vacation when you usually renew a year later or you set your plans, they've got advance notice. I didn't hear that we're ready to go and just make a decision amongst the 12 of us without really giving the public a chance, and not only just the public, giving me as a voting policymaker to be able to say, not just what Braddock District residents want, I want to know what everybody thinks around this county on what they'd like. So I guess I haven't heard, why wouldn't we want to have a public hearing on something this important? We only, with what Ms. Hines pointed out, you only could have up to 10 people speak, and depending on where it falls on the calendar, they could be closed out because we're voting on something else like the Cooper AAP Center or something. I mean, I think something this big, we should should have a public hearing on it.
Okay, so I will also say too that one of the things that actually even came up this morning is that Montgomery County is considering going back to post Labor Day. So I think in part of informing our decision, it would be good to know why different communities are doing what and what is working and what is not working. So I do think that there needs to be more conversation, but I don't have any suggestions on the best way to do that. Ms. Strauss wanted to say something, and then Ms. Hines.
Yes, I was going to say, one of our community members just passed me a survey that was taken in the community in 2011, where there were 23,000 people commented on pre-Labor Day start, and it looks like there was 68% in 2011 supported pre-Labor Day start. I must say this has been on the agenda for the PTAs for 30 years to start before Labor Day. So unless there's tremendous, if we want, I am not sure we need a public hearing, but I certainly am willing to listen to everybody else.
Ms. Strauss, you said how many surveyed?
There were 23,000 responses.
23,000 out of 180 plus
Right.
thousand
Through the
students and their
PTA.
families.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's pretty good.
I just leaned over
5 years ago.
to Ms. Hines and indicated if this is something you'd like for us to do, I just mentioned, if it's helpful to you all, we can certainly do a survey. If you'd like for us to do that, we're happy to do that.
Yeah, I would prefer survey over public hearing. Public hearing, you will get to hear from more vocal, more active people, maybe who have summer camps, summer swimming. But we need to hear from a broader spectrum of people rather than.
Excuse me, the survey, what FCPS did the survey, it wasn't a PTA survey, sorry. Correct.
Okay, Ms. Hines.
Yeah, I mean, unless other people want to weigh in, I sort of agree. I think a public hearing, it doesn't necessarily bring in a lot more people than we would probably have at our citizen participation, and a survey would get many more responses. And I think there's an argument for moving a little bit quickly here too, and setting up a public hearing takes time. Survey can be a little quicker. But my own feeling is that we should get this done in the next month or two, so.
Ms. Corbett Sanders.
That's why I want to go back to structuring it a good, sound public policy as to whether or not we should start before Labor Day. And then secondly, the timing of it. And so if good, sound public policy informs us that we should start before Labor Day, then that's a policy decision that we might want to have a debate over whether it is or isn't. But I think that there's pretty much agreement that there is good, sound public policy reasons to have it start before Labor Day. And then the process for actually getting to a pre-Labor Day start is whether you have a public engagement process or if you have a surveying process or if you have a combination of both. But the end game, I think, has to be that we have a decision as to whether or not we're starting this in 2017 before kids go home for the summer.
McLaughlin?
So I agree with what Ms. Hines said, and Mr. Moon had suggested that perhaps a survey allows us to get broader input, and I fully support that. I also support what Ms. Corbett Sanders is saying with a caveat. Absolutely, I think all of us are very much deeply committed to setting good policy, and it's not about emotions, it's not about individual perspectives. However, I do not believe that we as a board have engaged in a dialogue with our superintendent on where is the evidence that says you should start before Labor Day and that's better sound public policy or education policy and practice. So I mean, really, I think that as you mentioned, Ms. Huff, Montgomery County's thinking of going back to post-Labor Day. So I really would think that we have a responsibility to go beyond the quick work that staff, honored our request from the forum, asked us to give us some pros and cons, but obviously it was a very quick turnaround. But no, I'm still personally not convinced that we suddenly need to go to post-Labor Day and have our kids in school in the middle of August when I just haven't seen the evidence yet. And I think we have that responsibility before we can say it without having the data to back it up.
Okay, so I have a couple more comments, but from other people, but not knowing quite all of our options. But I'm wondering if at this point we've accomplished what we wanted to today in terms of saying no for 16-17. We want to go forward about talking about 17-18. Is it appropriate to talk about this at a forum or a work session to flush some more of this out?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I was thinking, if PEC meets sometime soon?
So we will meet before the next all-day work session, and we could bring it to the board at that time.
Awesome. Give us some recommendations about surveying and timing on community, all
Correct.
that. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so next step is this is going to go to Public Engagement Committee on March 4th, I think is that Monday, 14th. So then we won't have a recommendation to the board until then. Is everyone okay with that? I know we have a couple more comments. Okay. Ms. Palchuk?
My question just goes back again to, as we're looking recommendation, I think some people will have a different opinion, whether it's 1 week or whether it's 2 weeks. So I don't know what we can know or what we can look at beforehand of when we're sending out a survey, asking people, is it just overall pre-Labor Day, or can we give people a little bit more guidance, information?
So as part of this process, I'll work with my OCCR staff to develop some survey questions, and we can certainly take that to chairmans or PEC, and also run it by chairmans as well.
And Ms. Evans, did you want to say one more thing?
Oh, I was just going to say I would support a survey, and I like what Ms. Palchuk said about maybe surveying on different opportunities as well. As long as the survey as long as we know that the survey will be truly with parents, students, community members, one time, I think. Yeah, I think that's important. And if we need to put it off for one board meeting so PEC can take a look at any other public engagement. That I don't think we heard anything since we're talking about 17, as long as we then put it on an official agenda and make an affirmative decision. So, and I did just want to mention that I do know that there was some data collected from the 2-week start at Stewart and Falls Church. I'm not sure about Glasgow, but I could probably dig it out. But it's there was some studying done of that option.
We can probably find that. And just to interject, if we want to have a calendar in place by the end of the school year, if you didn't hear what was said earlier about the iterations of calendars, it does take time to create an effective calendar with good feedback from the community and from staff. So even with a start date, we still build the calendar around a start date. And if you give a start date, there are then other questions that come after that. So we would have to think about that as we move into the process. So the more time, the better for us.
So my concern is that I think we certainly want to benefit from letting the community know about the start date, but I will respectfully disagree with Mr. Smith. I think that we have to be really careful that you're right, taking the calendar there's a lot of moving parts in that date, and is once you all know as a staff, okay, this board has decided this is going to be the start date, then you start building from there. I don't want to suddenly find ourselves starting to wrestle with all the other dates within that calendar, all having to get it done necessarily before June. Like, I don't want one process to end up, So I do want to caution, because this has happened as a parent to me, that when we're dealing with timelines, we can't have like the survey going out right before the families are going on to spring break, so we need to be thinking about timing, because
I think PEC can talk about this, and I think it was pointed out earlier, if we have some kind of tentative goal to have a decision before the end of the school year, I think that's.
Thank you, Dr. Garza, because
that's
I'm hearing
sufficient,
some of
don't
my
you all?
colleagues, I was hearing some of my colleagues say, let's try to do it like by the next board meeting. I'm thinking, okay, I think we're in good shape, but if we look at this by the end of the school year, not trying to get done by next month.
I think if we were looking to next year, we would be on very fast track. But now that we're talking only about potentially 17, 18, I think you have a little bit more wiggle room. Sooner is better. I totally agree with that. But I think there maybe is a little bit more wiggle room potentially.
Okay, so I think we are good. So we're gonna bring this to PEC March 14th, and then this will be at work session again next month. Okay, a 5-minute break.
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break. Good thing is that we only have one more topic to go.